Bro, it's for some of these dudes, I want to go up to the freaking Bandai Namco studios, to the freaking boss designs and producer's office, knock on that shit, say, yo, did y'all even play this shit? Like, what made you think this situation was okay? It's been a while since I've done this angle. I don't know what it is. I kind of just like this angle. It's different, and I like using my camera. Sometimes it's more tedious to put the video together, but I like it. So before we get started, be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content, and I guess I don't got, yeah, do that, please. So a couple weeks ago on Twitter, I had said that my Code Vein review will be the best on YouTube. So buckle up, because you're about to be sold. I think. Code Vein is a post-apocalyptic dystopian game with vampiric themes, sharing a mild relation to the developer's previous work, God Eater. And so yes, if you weren't aware, Code Vein was developed by the same people who made God Eater. And if you don't know what God Eater is, let's just make it easy and say it like this, right? It's fast-paced Monster Hunter. Despite its anime look, I know a lot of you Monster Hunter people would actually enjoy it because of that fast-pacedness. So if you've never seen it before, I highly encourage you to just look around my channel. You know, there's a lot of shit going on there. And so with that information out there, Code Vein is the first new IP by Shift since 2010. And so with that being said, I'm actually going to be cutting them some slack for this game. It's like, hear me out, right? They've been making PSP level games, Monster Hunter style games for the past, like, what, 9 years at this point? So like, come on, bro. It's gonna be rough. So to start off, let's briefly talk about Code Vein's reception prior to release. It was marketed as a Dark Souls-esque type of game, simply meaning that it will be following that style of level and game progression. And so with that being said, my review is kind of like specifically meant to highlight the differences in ways that it differs itself from the Dark Souls franchise. And you know, it's like with Bandai's failure to properly articulate this, I mean, I guess I can't blame them, you know, it's not that much of their job. To like try to fix the connotation, but that plus what humans do assume, it started being talked about and literally being directly called anime souls. This isn't a huge problem, but people, you know, look for the Dark Souls series for specific aspects of, you know, what makes the Dark Souls games or genre unique. Difficulty, lore, character customization, starting with the look of your character, all the way down to like the playstyle that you would like to play as. And it's like, yeah, Code Vein shares these qualities in a sense, but the problem that I have is if you go into this game expecting some Sekiro, Dark Souls, Bloodborne type shit, there's a high chance you're gonna be disappointed. And while it does, you know, share some of these connections with the Dark Souls game, I mean, hence why it was marketed and talked about it like that, it still is nothing like them. Sounds weird, but I can explain. Bro, I think we all know what the hell's going on with this, right? It's funny that when I wrote this script, bro, and I sat down here an hour ago, and I was preparing, just looking at it, you know, whatever, I realized that I didn't even put or talk about character customization. And it's kind of because my brain was just like, dude, everybody, like, if you heard about this game in any form, you definitely know about the character customization. So like, I just intuitively was like, we don't need to talk about it, but now we do. Just like other Souls games, Code Vein's custom character creation is no laughing matter. And also, in a recent update, they actually reduced the cost of accessories, allowing you to go even crazier with your designs. All in all, it is very good. I think the biggest missing piece here is, I'd say, the lack of more outfits. And it's interesting, like, you don't actually really change your appearance at all, besides blood veils, yet they only gave us this small amount of outfits. I thought that was a little weird. But it's funny, you know, even with that small amount, people are still making it work. They are producing some crazy outfits. I love it. Past the look of your character, like I mentioned earlier, Code Vein also allows you to really get deep and, you know, adjust and dictate your playstyle. And, you know, when we talk about Dark Souls build creation, things like that, I would say that Code Vein's build creation is way more accessible than how it is in a normal Souls-like game. Compared to Dark Souls games, build creation revolves around allocating the proper stats to scale. The problem is though, for a new player, it's like so confusing. It was for me. I didn't feel like I knew what to do, so I just didn't even care about it. Whereas the structure that Code Vein takes makes it simpler, right? So on the surface, it may look confusing, but once you understand it, it is very simple and straightforward. Overall, I'd say it's a lot more free and even fun, right? So we'll get into that, the whole details of that, in the gameplay section of this review. So for now, just know this. Code Vein is structured in a way that not only allows for easy build creation, but is accessible too. You're free at any moment to completely change up your playstyle to help conquer challenges you face. So if you being up close is not working, swap out your gear to take a more range-based approach. Alright, cool. So let's talk about the story now. And the story is one of the biggest differences between Code Vein and your normal average Dark Souls type of game. I think the most important thing to know about Code Vein is that it is highly story-driven. Think about God of War PS4. Now, paint and replace the gameplay and level progression, structure progression to a Dark Souls format, and I think we could say you have Code Vein. And this, to me, is important to tell you because it's so different than Dark Souls type of games. Usually in those games, you go from barely having any context to what's going on. You see a cutscene or you see something happen. You're like, okay, I think I know what's going on. And then 7 hours later, some cutscene happens. You're like, wait a second. That last 7 hours starts to make sense. And you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. You know what I mean? It's not like that here, right? This is a cutscene heavy team and bond building experience. Cool. Okay? All right. Let's talk about the actual story now. In my reviews, we don't really get into the details of the games like that. I don't think it's needed. So let me say it like this. I personally was attracted to the Code Vein story. I liked it. And if you've played a God Eater game before, it's gonna feel a bit familiar. It's gonna feel like home, I guess we should say. And not only that, you should know if you play a God Eater game that when it comes to the story, these dudes are pretty nice with the pen. Where's my pen? They do a good and very nice job of introducing characters. It feels like a healthy and a smooth progression of the story. And so I say this with past experience, right? Most notably Gravity Rush 2. That was the one game, first person, story-driven game that I've ever played, and I've felt this rushness of it, right? They introduce a character, I blink, and then all of a sudden the whole character, everything's resolved. I'm like, wait, bro, that took 3 minutes to resolve the problem that you presented to me. So from that point on, I'm very sensitive to that in stories, and this game does a good job. It's a type of story where you get a lot of it through those cutscenes, but there's still some hints and some little pieces that aren't exactly answered directly, and it gets you a little curious. You get to want to know more. You might go on Google, start searching some things, come to my channel, learn some things. You know what I'm saying? But overall, like I said, I found it to be a good story. And so to wrap up, the last thing I want to say is, please pay attention to the story, bro. People, like I keep saying, are treating this game like a Dark Souls game, even when they have it in their hands. And what I mean by that is they just don't even gloss, they skip the story, they gloss over it, they don't care. Yet the problem with that is it's a good story, and when we get to the gameplay part, the story literally complements your playthrough. So if you skip that, you're going to miss out on a large section of the enjoyment to have in this game. So please, 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 I implore you to at least give it a try. If you don't like it, then whatever, skip it, right? Skip it and just play it. That's fine. Oh boy. I could talk about this all day, for a couple of days, but we actually don't need to do that. We really don't. Started off just the same way every other topic or kind of category we brought in this review has been presented. We're going to compare it again to Dark Souls and Bloodborne. Calling this a Soulsborne game is going to affect some of people's judgments, and in my opinion, cause some people's playthroughs to not reach the full potential. So if we break down the actual combat of Code Vein, it's structured like Dark Souls, where we have a light and heavy attack, and rolling the dodge is the name of the game. In Code Vein, we can also parry and block, but unlike Bloodborne and Dark Souls, there is literally no preferred or more beneficial method. The gameplay in Code Vein is the most free out of any Souls-like game, as we touched upon in the beginning custom character section of this review. The combat consists of a couple mechanics: Blood Code, the Blood Veil, gifts, and weapons. So a Blood Code is not exactly a class per se, but we're just going to call it that for now. And so these dictate your stats entirely, meaning you do not allocate points, you pick a blood code to kind of allocate the points for you. Furthermore, blood veils complement the blood codes. So firstly, they have their own stats. So you'd want to match a blood veil that has the same like scaling stats that your blood code is going to do or affect or boost, whatever. And then second, they have other attributes. As an example, one can be meant for close range combat, physical gifts. Another can be meant for long range support gifts. Then the gifts are your skills or your spells, and they can range from being passive to active, from support styled to attack based. And lastly is your weapon, so that could be a bayonet, a giant hammer, a giant sword, a small sword, a little spear of some, or a halberd, a halberd, Each weapon has different types, so they're not all one-handed weapons, don't all feel the same. I will say there's going to be like 3 distinct categories that have 3 distinct kind of combo chains, and then from there, then it can kind of just vary a little bit with the charge attack and things like that. So while there is only, I think, like 5 weapon categories, they are not just all the same, right? There's like I said, 3 distinct different weapons in those categories. And so without getting into deep details of the build creation, as I've already went deep in this, so link to that video will be in the description. Between the blood codes and the gifts, those are kind of like the 2 main things that dictate and you can adjust to change your playstyle. And like I've been mentioning, this is the exact contrary to Dark Souls Bloodborne build creation. For those, it's literally just allocating stats. And the biggest problem I see with that is, one, it's kind of confusing. You don't know what to do yet. You just started. You don't even know what weapons are out there. You don't know what they're going to require. And so from there, it doesn't feel too important, right? It feels useless to worry about it, at least for the first playthrough. So if you decide to pick up Code Vein, I just highly encourage you to gradually, try to look at what the blood codes you're getting, see the gifts that they have, read the descriptions of the blood codes and the gifts. Like, all it takes really is just reading the descriptions, and from there, once you've figured out the blood code, blood veil, then it gets onto your weapon.
This man's sucking off the game, bro. If you don't say something bad, bro.
You're right. I'm like sucking this thing off. So something we haven't touched on yet, like at all, is the difficulty. This is another, direct way to compare it to the Dark Souls franchise. This is what people look for. This is kind of why, it was marketed as Anime Souls. But let me put it on the table right now. This is by far the easiest Dark Souls. But I don't even know if I want to say that because, bro, you're going to rage. You're going to rage. Wow. Dude.
Had enough.
But the biggest problem with this factor, the difficulty spectrum attribute, is that it's doing something that I like to call fake difficulty. I never understood, appreciated, comprehended the smoothness and the polishedness of Dark Souls type styled games until I touched Code Vein. The roughness of just the gameplay, the fact that, like, you pick a hat and 90% of the freaking hairstyles don't freaking... I'm getting off topic. I'm telling y'all, these bosses do the dumbest things. Like, it's so frustrating. When I get bopped in Sekiro, or Dark Souls, or Bloodborne, whatever it may be, I know full well, 100% in my soul, in my body, in my veins, that it was my fault. But whenever I get bopped in Code Vein, I'm telling you, it wasn't my fault. It was some bullshit. I don't know if I can explain it properly, but I'm gonna try. We're gonna try. I noticed this in a stream when I was fighting the Gilded Hunter. It's like bosses essentially have like uncapped potential, if that makes sense. Some moves don't have settings set, and it's more of like a tracking setting, right? And what I mean is, like, say a boss has a dash move. In a typical Souls game, there's a set of ways you could dodge it, counter the move. Like, it's like a skill. It's like, okay, you do this and it works. And when we talk about the move, it's like their move has a set distance that they're going to go. So it's like, okay, you can either jump that move or you sidestep it, versus some moves you can't do that at all. You gotta do something else. No, with Code Vein, it's like unset. You don't know what the hell's gonna happen. Not like on a severe level, but it's just like the previous method isn't gonna work because it's not based off a setting. The dash move doesn't have a distance programmed. It's programmed to fucking track you, right? It's so no matter, you know what I mean? Do you get what I'm saying? Like, I feel like as I try to explain it, it doesn't sound logical, it doesn't make sense, but you just gotta trust me on this. And I think other people can attest that have played it. Maybe they wouldn't articulate it the same way as I am, but they could tell you and attest that that's what it feels like. But to talk like less about that, just talk about the whole gameplay as a whole. You could just tell and feel that it's just unpolished, a little rough on the edges. And this is kind of the one place where I say I wanted to shift some slack, because this is the first time they're trying to make this type of combat, make these such strict rules with the combat, right? God Eater is so free. You get hit, no stuns, you know what I mean? So I'll cut them some slack. They're not used to this type of combat. So the last thing on the gameplay aspect to touch upon would be the bosses. You know, that's another big monumental piece of Dark Souls type of games. And this game is no short of that. So real quick on that, you know, they're all right. That's all I gotta say. They were all right. Some were a bit on the drunk side and they couldn't hit you, right? Making the fight like an absolute joke. Like I was like, dude, what was that beginning cutscene making you look scary? Oh my god, it was just so uneventful, you know? Others were utterly unfair and relate back to what I was talking about. Now, some people had less trouble with certain bosses. It's kind of how it always is with these Dark Souls games, but nonetheless, you could tell some of the moves just weren't right. They weren't fair. Bro, it's for some of these dudes, I want to go up to the freaking Bandai Namco studios, to the freaking boss designs and producer's office, knock on that shit, say, yo, did y'all even play this shit? Like, what made you think this situation was okay? Most of y'all know exactly who played, know exactly what I'm talking about. I don't think they played it. I don't think they played it, y'all. I don't think they played it. So at the end of the day, I feel like the story made the boss fights more enjoyable for some of them, right? But to be honest, I was always trying something weird. My builds were never like effective in a way. You know, I was just messing around. So that added a bit of difficulty, you know, to my playthrough. And so on that note, two-handeds are the best weapons in the game. So if you fly through this game with your two-handed, just know that you're kind of not cheating, but you're taking an easier route. So with that being said, try some stuff out, you know? So if you think the game was super easy, you're probably using a very strong weapon, two-handed most likely. So I would implore you to try something else. It kind of, like I said, adds a little bit of difficulty, makes you play differently, right? You can't just walk up and then just destroy them, you know? So between the gameplay, story, custom character creation, bosses, all that jazz, what's the final verdict? Now, I don't do reviews often. Like, was that enough areas to talk about? I don't know. But, I mean, at the end of the day, it feels like that is the most important pieces of Code Vein that we need to talk about. And, like, those are the main pieces that I look for in a Souls game, right? So, but the only thing I would say is I wouldn't call it story if I was talking about a Souls game. I'd say more of like lore or like world in a sense, you know? But, you know, after that rant about, first off, the unpolishedness and the bosses, those are like the heights of my dislikes of Code Vein, right? Everything else was great, you know? So, I mean, there's a few other small things. Something like the lack of wider range of weapons and blood veil variety. That was very, very saddening, but it wasn't awful, right? It was still not awful. Just, it left room to wish, right? I also kind of wish that gifts were easier to get, and I feel like this is a bit subjective because I just wanted them to be easier to get so I can get them earlier, so I can start messing around with builds earlier in the process of playing this game, you know? And then the last one would be loading times, but bro, I'm on a base PS4 from 2014, so like, yeah, that dude's a little grandpa or something, I don't know. So despite, you know, these negative aspects, Code Vein, like I said, is an enjoyable experience. There's 3 total endings, so there is replay value there, and past that, you will not unlock every gift by the end of your first playthrough, so already there is a nice incentive to continue playing, get the rest of the endings so you can, you know, try those out, make some builds. So is it worth $60? I think so. I'd say yes. If you're a diehard Souls fan looking for something a bit different, but familiar, I'd highly recommend Code Vein, as long as you take what I said and soak it in. If you're more an elitist type, bruh, I can't promise Code Vein is gonna make you happy, right? Those reasons, those problems might piss you off substantially, you know? Because I feel like most people have a strong love for the series. Like I said at the very start, have these aspects that they look for and they need to see. And so whenever you see Code Vein lacks it, the strength of them, or it's kind of changing it up in a different way, that might not make you happy. So if you pinned me down with the gun to my throat, head, whatever, and said I had to give this game a score, I'm gonna give it 7.8 out of 10. The unpolishedness, lack of truly engaging and monumental boss battles hurt the super good gameplay concept and story that they presented to me. If they polished the smoothness and worked on the boss designs a bit, this would be easily an 8.5 or a 9. I promise you. Other than that, Hope you guys enjoyed this review. Be sure to leave a like, subscribe for more content, and follow me on social media. Your boy's trying to talk. So other than that, that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys enjoy, like I said, and I will see you all in the next video. All right. Peace. I'ma floss down when these people try to test. If you in my way, I'ma have to put you to rest. Yeah, I know it might sound complex. Everyone around me always wanna be the best.